Hola, soy Alejandro de Key Spanish, and today I'm excited to bring you a conversation with Connor from the channel Breakthrough Spanish. He's an American who has mastered Spanish and is an expert in pronunciation, something he really enjoys, is passionate about, and that's the focus of today's conversation. We cover many interesting topics like why is pronunciation important, why should you pay attention to it, as well as the biggest challenges for English speakers like the vowels, the plosives like T, P, K, as well as diving into specific techniques or the use of music for helping with your pronunciation or shadowing and many, many more topics. You will have them in the chapters of the video to navigate through them if you want to, but I recommend listening from start to finish because we really do cover a lot and many, many interesting things that you, I'm sure, will be happy to learn. So this is my conversation with Connor from Breakthrough Spanish. I hope you find it useful. Enjoy. Hola, Connor. How are you?
Hola, hola. I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. I really like your channel. You have very high quality content. And I would love to talk about pronunciation with you because it's your expertise, right? But first, why don't you share a bit of who you are and where your relationship with Spanish started?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. I started learning Spanish in school, like a lot of people. I'm from the U.S. and the most common language to learn here is Spanish when you're in school. And I started at a pretty early age, maybe 11 or 12, but it wasn't serious. I didn't learn much, kind of like most people. And I think it's, from what I've heard, similar in Spain, where the school system isn't very good at teaching languages.
Exactly. I
And
think it's something pretty generalized to language teaching in the schools, right? By the nature of it, if you put 20 kids that are not interested in learning something, it's very hard, anything you do, to make them succeed, right? And especially if you don't have time to practice and everything. So, yeah, I think it's a common problem in the schools with language, foreign languages.
exactly. Um, but eventually, I started to like Spanish. The main reason was because when I was about 15, I went to Guatemala with my dad, and we went on a trip there, and I got to use a little bit of Spanish. I spoke Spanish with a real person for the first time, not my teacher. And I kind of saw how it could be useful and interesting to me. And then at home, my family hosted an exchange student from Argentina when I was in high school, and then I became friends with, I lived with a guy from a Spanish-speaking country, although we spoke English. It just gave me kind of a personal connection to the language that helped me want to learn more. And that and some other travels really helped Spanish become part of my life and made me want to learn more. Eventually, I went and I lived in Chile for a year as an exchange student, and that made a big impact on my own Spanish and made me want to keep learning more. And that was many, many years ago now, but I've continued to use Spanish throughout my life for different trips and for work, and now for on my YouTube channel and with my business. I work with different people to help them with their Spanish. So I've really made it part of my life, and it's something that I really enjoy.
Wow, awesome. So many different experiences that put you into contact with Spanish, first in
Hmm.
Guatemala, now Chile, your business is a good example, right? At how many opportunities with Spanish you have. I think in the US in particular, there are so many options out there. So you were interested in Spanish, you saw that it had some use, some value with talking to real people. And why your special interest in pronunciation? Because that's what you focus on, right? That's what you really enjoy. You have great pronunciation or you speak Spanish. Why is that interesting to you?
Um, well, it's just always something that first it kind of the interest came naturally. Like I was just sort of, I've always been fascinated by accents in general. In English, when I was a kid, I liked to imitate people from with different accents, and it's just always something that's interested me. And then when I started learning Spanish, like most kids in my school, it just wasn't very cool to try to make an effort at your pronunciation. So we all had horrible pronunciation because yeah, I don't know, you just feel pressure and you're, 14 years old.
Yeah, that's something interesting, right? When you in Spain it's the same. If you pronounce something properly in English, you are made fun of. Right? It's like,
Uh-huh.
you are weird. You are the weird kid, right? That
Exactly.
pronounces properly. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then eventually something that helped me a lot, that helped the accent and the pronunciation kind of stick with me, was music. That made a really big difference in finding music in Spanish that I really enjoyed. I think that a lot of the things made their way kind of subtly into my own brain, into my own pronunciation habits, without necessarily training every piece of it. Because we got some training in it in school, but not very much. It really wasn't the focus. The focus was conjugation for the most part. And so eventually the different aspects of Spanish pronunciation, I started to pay attention to them and try really hard to mimic and imitate people as much as I could, and make it sound as close to the Spanish that I was hearing as I could. I didn't record myself or anything back then. It wasn't as easy as it is now, but that's definitely something that I would have done. It's something that I recommend to people to do all the time, but just trying my best to imitate people was really how it started to come together.
Wow. And was it hard for you to develop the kind of pronunciation you were comfortable with, where you said, okay, now I sound the way I liked? It was a tough process, or how was it? It took a little bit of too long, or?
Well, if you count the several years of learning with bad pronunciation and not really trying, then yeah, it took several years. It took, maybe 4 years, but I think I was also not, because I wasn't trying. It's hard for me to say exactly how long. But I think a big thing that helped was that I just stopped. I was worried about what the other kids in my school thought about the way that I was pronouncing. If I pronounced it correctly, maybe I would be looked at as weird. And eventually I decided I didn't care. And so I tried really hard to make it sound better. And, most people watching this are not kids in school anymore. But I think we still have some of the same patterns, even as adults. You don't want to sound silly, or you don't want to sound like not like yourself. And so a big thing for me was feeling like I wanted to sound like identify as a Spanish speaker, like feel like a Spanish speaker. So that was a big piece. And I think for a lot of people who are trying to figure out how to feel more comfortable in their Spanish, something that's really helpful is to just think of yourself as an additional identity that you have, that's a Spanish-speaking one, so that you feel free to say things differently, because it feels strange at first, but eventually it feels more and more natural.
Yeah, that ties into one of the questions I wanted to ask, is why you should focus on pronunciation at all if you are a student, right? Why bother with pronunciation? Why should you focus on it? And you said two very important things, that students have some shame associated with the way they sound, some of them. A bit of self-aware of the way they sound, or whatever. And then just the way your pronunciation is connected to your identity is quite particular, right? It's quite intense. And also, I think, making yourself able to be understood by others is also a good reason. But can you share why a student now listening to this should spend the time and effort in improving pronunciation? Why is that important?
I think there are kind of 3 main reasons why it's important. The first is because it helps you communicate better, because it makes it easier for Spanish speakers to understand you. If you have a really thick accent, it's harder. People have to try harder to understand you. It's exactly the same in English. If you're an English speaker and someone speaks to you with a really thick accent from any country, you're just not used to the sounds, and so it takes more effort to understand that person. So purely for communication, to make it easy on Spanish speakers, and it's not just you being nice either, it's also by making it easy on them, they give you less they understand you better, and you get fewer quizzical looks. They don't look at you like, like, what are you saying? Like, they don't understand you, and that can kind of hurt your confidence, which is the second thing, really, is that it builds your confidence. When you know exactly how to say something, when you're confident in the way that you are saying something, I think it makes people more willing to speak. Most people, like, the biggest thing that they're afraid of is speaking and putting themselves out there. Lots of people spend many years listening and practicing grammar, but avoiding speaking because it can be scarier. But when you know how to say something, and you know that the way that you're saying it is correct and that it's going to be understood, then it makes it you're more likely to want to speak. And also because people don't look at you in a confused way when you speak, it reinforces something positive. You feel like, okay, well, I'm actually communicating effectively. They understand me, and maybe they say, oh, wow, you speak great Spanish, and these like positive compliments make you want to speak more. And then the last thing is that it helps you comprehend better, helps you understand Spanish better, because when you have a better sense for the sounds and you can identify them, it just makes the language. Most English speakers think that Spanish sounds really fast, rapid fire, like every word runs together. And in a way, it's kind of true. The words do run together, and the syllables tend to be faster than in English. But when you learn to pick apart the different sounds, it doesn't sound like one long sentence or one long word. Instead, it just becomes easier to understand. So I think those are the main things, like communication, your confidence, and your ability to comprehend what other people are saying.
Fantastic reasons, and I want to share my experience as a not only native speaker but teacher who has worked with more than 300 students. There is a big difference between listening to someone with clear pronunciation, not perfect pronunciation, but clear pronunciation, and someone who is difficult to understand, right? The effort required and just the feeling. For me as a teacher, I'm okay. I'm happy to obviously it's my job and I do it happily. But for native speakers in the wild, in the real world, you will find a very big difference if you pronounce clearly in their willingness to talk to you, right? Because it's so much more comfortable to have someone that you clearly understand, even if he doesn't or she doesn't speak perfectly. So I can confirm that first reason is very important. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's about speaking clearly. You don't have to sound like a native speaker. The goal, I think, is really to sound as clear as possible, so that it doesn't require a ton of effort for people to understand you. And your English is excellent, and it sounds like you've put in lots of work into your own English to be clear. For me, there's no effort involved in understanding you, and so. I think it goes, you can understand, English speakers can understand this kind of in the same way. When you just think about how your interactions go with someone whose accent is easier to understand, that's the kind of the frame of mind that I think is helpful to have. Because the basis of the question was, does it even matter? Why don't I just speak Spanish like it's English? People will probably understand me anyway. And some people might, but a lot of people might not.
Yeah, and it's not just a degree of understanding or not. There's a continuum, right? It's just, am I willing to go through this situation for 30 minutes with you if it's hard for me to understand you?
Yeah.
And you have to keep that in mind also with native speakers, right? So, very good point. And you mentioned something, sounding like a native speaker. That ties into my next question.
Yeah.
Should that be the goal? I hear that a lot from students. I want to sound like native speakers. I have an opinion, but I want to hear yours first. What is it? Is it a good goal to have, to speak like a native speaker?
I think it depends on the person. It's a totally personal thing. It would require a ton of effort. So it's kind of up to you if you want to put in that effort. I don't think it will bring you a lot of benefit. The biggest benefit comes from learning the most important parts of pronunciation. The biggest benefit comes in becoming clearer in the way that you speak and feeling more confident in how you speak and making it easy for Spanish speakers to understand you. If you sound like a native speaker, it's pretty cool, but it doesn't necessarily, and maybe in some ways it could help you feel more attached to a culture or part of a culture. But for most people, it would, I think that if you're really natural at mimicking people, it's possible, but it would take a really long time. And for the most part, if you live in a country, a specific Spanish-speaking country for many years. So I don't know. I don't think it's an important goal for most people. And probably beyond a certain level, your time is better. It's better to spend your time on other parts of the language.
I completely agree. I'm not sure if it's even possible, to be honest. I have not found any instances of someone sounding exactly like the native speaker. You always have some accent, and you don't want to lose your accent. This is a part of your identity, right? So why would you try to lose it? First, I don't think it's a good idea. And second, it would be frustrating because I don't think it's personally very feasible, right? And yeah, in my personal opinion, is why would you want that? And even if you did, it's so difficult that is frustrating. Just focus on being understood, and your accent is part of your identity. But well, it's important to work on it at least, and to get it as good as you can. But don't obsess over it. And I don't think being a native speaker is personally a good goal to have. You know?
Totally agree.
Let's talk about specific challenges for English speakers, which is most of my audience, I think. What are those challenges for them? I think the vowels are tricky, right? The famous Spanish R. But share a bit with us, what are those biggest issues they face?
Well, the biggest thing that I think is important for learners to understand isn't necessarily related to one particular sound. It's really that everything is connected. Something that I've found is that when you say a particular sound the Spanish way versus the English way, it helps the following sound come out more easily, and then the following sound. I have this video on rolling your R's where in that video I point out that if I try to roll my R after saying the letter T the English way, as in like the t, and then I try to say if I try to say tres, but I say tres, the T, it doesn't work because the English T is here, the Spanish T is back here. And in that way, there are many other examples. It's really hard if you have English-speaking patterns in one part of your Spanish. It makes it harder for other parts of your Spanish to also flow smoothly. So I think the first thing is to kind of go back to the basics. A lot of this kind of, I guess, brings me to the second part, which is vowels. A lot of Spanish learners spend a lot of time on, or spend a bit of time on vowels, and they learn them at the beginning, and then they assume that they have them, that they're saying them all correctly. And so by going back to the basics, even if you're pretty advanced in Spanish, you might find that there are certain sounds or certain vowels that you're saying differently than you thought you were. So yeah, the vowels are a really big one. Making sure that they are basically shorter than they are in English. Making sure I mentioned the letter T a minute ago. The letter T, P, and K,
P,
for example. This is a group.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very distinctive aspect of English, because when they speak Spanish, right? Come on, tas, or que, that's kes, tes, pes. Very distinctive.
Exactly. It's funny because most English speakers think that the R is the most important thing, and I really don't think that it is. It's the thing that bothers a lot of English speakers. They say, I'll never be able to speak good Spanish because I can't roll my R. But I think if I speak English with a rolled R, you'll understand me perfectly, and I would understand you perfectly. And I think for Spanish speakers, it's similar. Is that the case? You think that if someone speaks Spanish with good pronunciation, except for the R, and they say, I don't know, mi perro está en el carro, Is
Right,
that like
right.
is it pretty understandable still, or does it?
It's understandable, yeah, yeah. It's easier than the confusion with vowels, for example, because with vowels you have the issue with the verbs, especially. You can mean different tense, right? There's now so dijo, dije, or the verbs ending in o or e. That distinction of vowels, if they are not clear, it can be confusing, and sometimes it happens to me with my students that they try to conjugate a verb in a certain person, grammatical person, and I'm not sure about the vowel is not clear. And are they talking about him or themselves, or who are they talking about? So I think vowels are more conducive to being misunderstood than the R. Because in the R, yeah, there are minimal pairs, this distinction of caro and carro and pero and perro. But the context will always tell you if you mean dog or bat or face or car, all right?
Exactly.
So I think, yeah, the vowels probably are the biggest hindrance to being understood, much more than the R. That's for sure.
And the those letters that we were just mentioning, the implosives, the p, t, k sounds. The reason that made me think of the R is because if you listen to Spanish speakers imitate English speakers, like do an accent to whatever, to make fun of us or just for fun, most of the time they'll do the R, the sound, but also they do the, like you said, ¿cómo estás?
¿Cómo estás? Yeah.
And that's a sound that most English speakers don't quite notice. It's not obvious to us because that's how we say the R, at least in American English. That's how most English speakers say the R, and so we don't notice if we're saying ¿cómo estás? We might not hear the difference. And so learning some of those, it's mainly the P, T, and the K that do this, that are subtle but pretty different.
Yeah, it's interesting that you are right. When we make fun of English speakers, we do that with the plosives. Right? Te llamas Teresa, right? And the R's and the T's, the T and these sounds are the ones that you can say immediately. You're talking to an American or someone from the UK. Right?
Exactly, and it's something that we don't even notice. It's completely.
Exactly.
We don't hear it, and so a little bit of training, a little bit of awareness of sounds like that can really help.
Exactly. Okay, so anything else? Vowels with the T, P's, keys, and especially I think you talked about the linking of words and seeing the sounds as a system, right? How one sound affects the other. That's essential. But I think talk a bit more about this concept of la sinalefa, or linking these words together. You said it has an effect on the way you understand Spanish, and that's completely right. In my experience, a student that is hearing something and that can understand you show them the text written and say, these are two words. Now I understand it, right? So el amigo is el amigo. Okay, I heard a different word. So talk a bit more about the impact of linking and these words that join together.
An important thing, this happens in, I don't know, I'm not going to say every language, but probably most. In English, we definitely connect one word to the next, but it happens a little bit differently. And I think partly because our vowels tend to be longer, it is easier to pick apart the words. I don't know. I'm a native English speaker, so I can't hear English with those ears to know if it sounds like all one long sentence. I don't know. Maybe that would be interesting for English speakers to know. When you started learning English, did it sound like one run-on word? Or was could you hear the difference between words?
I think that happens too, right? So, what are you doing? What are you doing? So, what are you doing? No, you hear, what are you doing? Things like that, especially more relaxed speech. But I think the difference is, as you said, because the length of syllables is more distinct in English, right? Maybe it makes it easier to pinpoint when a word does start and when does it end. And in Spanish being shorter and faster, maybe they mesh together more. I don't know the specifics of it, but I think in English you also have this phenomena of hearing words together and making it more confusing. Right?
Yeah, and so I think that's helpful for English speakers to know that it's not just Spanish that's fast. We speak quickly too. It's really just your perspective, and the more you learn, the slower it sounds, the easier it becomes to understand. But yeah, the words in Spanish tend to link together, in particular when one word ends in a vowel, and the next one begins in a vowel, like mi amigo Eduardo. Amigo Eduardo would probably become one long sound rather than mi amigo Eduardo.
Yeah, and then you have
There's
the
like
what is
gaps
called
in
the
between.
vocalic reduction, la reducción vocálica. When the vowel is the same, then it's even more difficult, right? So I don't know. Viene now an example that ends in one vowel, and the same la amiga instead of el amigo, la amiga,
Uh-huh.
la amiga. So you
Uh-huh.
have the a and the a. Ooh, that's tricky. And for example, a good example is the pretérito perfecto, right? For example, ha hecho or ha tenido, ha abierto, that we use in Spain a lot. I had a student that learned this tense but didn't know that it was composed with two words, right? He just heard ha abierto, ha tenido, ha hecho, ha dicho, and because he learned with an audio program, when I shared with him, it's just the verb haber, and then another word. It's like, okay, it's just two words. That's interesting. I didn't know. Right? So with the pretérito perfecto, I think this is very, very clear. The meshing of words and the lack of distinction between them. It's
Yeah, whenever there's an H, it seems to be that the words flow together or mesh together more because of that, because the silent H. Another thing that's interesting, or maybe my theory as to why this happens, is because of where the stress or the emphasis falls in Spanish, which is almost always on the second to last syllable in like 80% of words. Because anytime a word ends in a vowel, it has that. So like casa, you don't say casa, you say casa, because casa ends in a vowel. Or if a word ends in N or S, it has the same pattern. And that accounts for like 80% of words. And because of this, you get a really distinct rhythm in Spanish. And also because you don't have the stress on the last syllable most of the time. The word, I think that maybe the last syllable, it's more likely to blend together with the first syllable of the next word. Like you said, if it's the two of the same vowels, if I'm saying la casa antigua, it's gonna the two A's are gonna flow together because the stress. I don't know if the stress was on the last word in the last syllable in casa. If I said la casa, maybe it would be more clear. I don't know, but I suspect that that's part of why it's maybe hard to hear for English speakers.
Okay, so let's get into some specifics on how one can improve the pronunciation. Right. First, do you need a teacher? Do you need someone to work with one-on-one with you, or go to a classroom, or is something that you can work by yourself on it and improve?
I mean, I think that like basically anything that you want to learn, it's usually faster with a teacher. If I wanted to learn how to play the piano, I would probably make fewer mistakes and learn, I don't know, just learn in a more structured way if I had a teacher. But you can also, it depends on the person. You can learn really effectively on your own as well. I think maybe the big thing that helps is getting feedback every once in a while, hearing from somebody else. What do you hear? What differences do you hear between my pronunciation and the native speaker's pronunciation so that I can know what to practice? And then besides I think having a teacher helps, but it's not necessary. The other things that are really, really helpful are having some clear instruction, which can come from a teacher or it can come from YouTube or lots of other resources that are free. It can come from paying really close attention to the things that you're listening to. So once you are aware of the sounds, anything that you listen to in Spanish becomes pronunciation practice. You're reinforcing the different sounds. You can't listen to everything at once, but if I learn the vowels today, and then tomorrow I listen to a podcast in Spanish, and I pay close attention to the vowels, it's a lot easier, I think, to make those vowels start to, it reinforces itself while you're listening. And then being really motivated to make improvements in your pronunciation is really helpful. This is something that I read in, I was reading some kind of research papers on the topic recently, and one of the big things that research found, and maybe it's no surprise, that helped people to make noticeable improvements in their pronunciation was just being really motivated, because it takes work, it takes effort. Having a teacher isn't going to do the work for you. Nobody is going to do the work for you. It takes effort to make improvements in anything. And so if you are really motivated, it's going to help for you to make faster progress. And I think that everybody has some degree of motivation. You just have to uncover what that motivation is, whether you care about it because you want to feel more comfortable in a Spanish-speaking country, if you want to make sure that other people understand you better, or you're tired of people responding to you in English, or if you really love, you really love Spanish from Colombia and you want to sound just like a Colombian, and you love the country and you really want to go there, or you've been there. Whatever you really care about, that can be your source of motivation.
Yeah, as you said, as with anything, this motivation is key, right? And particularly in something like pronunciation, that is, as you said, it will require hard work and feedback. I think feedback in some way or another, it doesn't have to be a teacher. It can be your exchange partner or I don't know, a native speaker. You will get feedback if they ask you to repeat a lot. That's feedback, right? And maybe you can pay attention to what kind of words cause you trouble. But yeah, some kind of feedback is key. It's key. What do you think about, for example, shadowing? It's a popular technique. Maybe you can explain a bit more what that is and how students can use it if it's effective.
I think it's pretty hard, to be honest, but it is helpful. So shadowing is, it's when you speak alongside a native speaker or another speaker. You try to speak at the same time as them, like you're repeating what they are saying. And for a lot of people, I find that this is pretty tough at first, and that it helps to just pause whatever you're listening to and repeat sentence by sentence. And then you can work your way up to speaking at the same time as them. It's also important to find audio that you're familiar with and that's close to your level. So like if you try to do this with something that's brand new to you, like if you're listening to the radio in Spanish and it's the news and they're talking about whatever is on the news, it's new information, new words, new topic. And so it's going to be really hard. If you instead take whatever you're using to learn from that week or that month, and it's a lesson that you've already listened to or a video that you've already watched, then you're already familiar with it, you know what to expect, then it becomes a lot easier. And you can get more out of it because you already understand the topic, you understand the vocabulary, and you can, your brain doesn't have to try as hard to keep up with the speaker. It can also be helpful to slow down the audio, which is a function that you can do on YouTube pretty easily in the settings on any video. And doing that can help you keep up. But it's not totally authentic speech. So eventually you want to get to people speaking at full speed if you do that.
Yeah, I think it takes away some of the natural speech when you slow it down. I think I would prefer to try to find a simpler audio that you have the transcript for or something to simplify the content instead of slowing it down. Because in my experience, slowing things down, I tried doing that. And I don't know, it just loses the pace, the natural rhythm. But if it helps, that could be an option too. The last thing in terms of techniques, tactics, you shared before how important music was for you, how much you enjoy it. And probably there's nothing in language that connects to your emotions more than music. But how do you use it effectively to improve your pronunciation? Do you have any approach, any specific way students can be productive with music, or just listen to it, enjoy, and sing along, and that's it?
I think that's it, really. It's not so much a productivity thing, I don't know. The thing that I like the most about it is that it doesn't feel like you're practicing. You're just having fun with it, which most of the time I think that most learners don't really have enough fun with Spanish that they're learning. They do a lot of study, and being hardworking is definitely helpful. But if you don't have any fun with the language, you're probably going to give up because it's not gonna be any fun. You're not going to want to keep doing it. So finding music that you connect to, I think helps. Watching TV shows is something that a lot of people recommend, but they're really hard to understand. It's a really advanced skill to be able to understand a TV show. I have trouble understanding TV shows in English sometimes. So I think that listening to music is a nice alternative because to me, Spanish music tends to be more clear than English music in terms of the sounds. It's just, to me, it's easier to understand.
It depends, because there's some reggaeton things I don't
depends
understand
on
at all.
yeah, maybe that's not the best example because if you take, it totally depends on the type of music. You're right. But the point is, if you find music that you like, that you're able to understand, then it's something that you want to listen to over and over and over again. If it's a song you like, you naturally want to listen to it over and over again.
Exactly.
And repetition is so important. So if you do that, you're learning and you're not even feeling like you're learning. But for a simple thing, yes, looking up the lyrics and trying to memorize them, sing along, looking up words that you don't know, just getting familiar with the song. Then the more you listen to it, the more it'll kind of sink in.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I remember a teacher I really look up to. She said, why do we use songs to teach grammar concepts? Why are you doing that with songs? Just enjoy the song. The song is to be listened to and to enjoy it and to have emotion to it. Right? Don't add grammar to your vocabulary. Just enjoy. Right? You have other things to learn from, and with the music, just have fun with it. And so that might be the best approach. Just have fun.
Yeah.
So awesome, Connor. So you have a pronunciation course. You mentioned, of course, you don't need a teacher, and you can find many resources out there on YouTube for pronunciation. But I honestly believe, as a teacher, that some structure is very valuable. And I went through your course, and it's very well organized. It has lots of things. One of the things you mentioned, develop your Spanish identity. You have a very nice exercise where you can choose Sofia Vergara or Antonio Banderas to exemplify your identity as a Spanish speaker and the way they speak. And it's very detailed too. You have the individual sounds, the links. But why don't you share a bit more about your pronunciation course with people that might be interested in improving the way they sound?
Sure. It offers basically the structure that learning on your own very often lacks. When you want to learn how to improve your Spanish pronunciation and feel more confident in the way that you're saying things, you basically have two options, or three. First would be to hire a private tutor and have them walk you through everything, correct you along the way, guide you through the different sounds. And this has lots of good benefits, but it's not necessarily the way that the person explains it to you might not necessarily make sense to you. The second option is just to Google everything, and you'll find good resources, but everything is very disparate. Everything is disorganized, and you don't necessarily have a learning plan. So it takes a really disciplined learner to create a plan of their own. So
especially with pronunciation, I have to say, because with many things you have apps today with Duolingo and in general Spanish, but me as a teacher, I have a hard time finding something well organized to teach pronunciation. Right? You have more technical books, but it's not easy to find something well organized regarding pronunciation, I have to say. So good thing you did your course.
Thank you. Yeah, so having a bit of structure goes a really long way because it helps you. I think that the way that I structured my course is to force you to return to the fundamentals, like I talked about earlier, because a lot of learners get pretty far in their Spanish, and then they are struggling to make themselves understood, or they're struggling to understand Spanish speakers. And I think that a big reason that they do that is because they haven't, they glossed over the fundamentals of pronunciation at the very beginning. And revisiting that and some of the aspects of pronunciation that most learners never even think about, like the rhythm of the language, stress and intonation, and having that be kind of a foundation and then working through lots of the sounds that many English speakers never hear, like those sounds like with the implosive p, th, k sounds that make a really big difference in your pronunciation. All that stuff gives you a lot more confidence in the way that you're able to speak. So that's how the course is structured, basically in five main parts, where you have, first we talk about the rhythm, intonation, and stress in the language, kind of what I refer to as the sounds behind the language, not the ones that you hear right away as a foreign speaker of Spanish, but the ones that when you hear Spanish from across the room and you can't hear what words are being said, you still know it's Spanish.
Yeah, you said the personality of Spanish in the course, okay, which
Exactly.
I really like, right? What makes Spanish, the Spanish personality. And you said rhythm, intonation, right? So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly, yeah, the personality of the language, what makes it sound like Spanish. And then we talk about vowels, which most learners, they say, okay, I know the vowels, they're I, E, O, U, and, easy, done. But knowing them and being able to say them like that and then have them being part of your Spanish, that's a whole other question, and most people don't train it in any kind of intentional way. The third part, we talk about what I call false friend consonants, which are the ones that look the same and act the same as in English, but they sound just a little bit different. To Spanish ears, they sound very different. To our ears, it doesn't sound quite as different. So that's where we talk about vowels like, or consonants like B, D, and G, P, T, and K, L, and this is all before we get to the R, which is the next section. This is the thing that most learners want to get to right away because it bothers them that they can't roll their R's. But what I mentioned earlier about all the sounds being connected, to me, it's much, much easier to learn to roll your R when you have a good foundation in the other sounds. So that's the reason I structured the course this way and left the R for later, because I wanted to make sure people had the best chance possible of rolling their R's. Because
you have a whole section on it, right? So it's not even, but it means that if you really want to do it, you will have a whole section on it with all the details, and it's very nuanced, right? You start with the soft R and move to the rolled R, so there is a lot of information about how to do it right there.
Exactly, yeah, it's very, very thorough. And then in the last section, we talk about linking, connecting your words, and making your speech kind of flow. And I think that something that's really, really important that sets it apart is that it forces you to practice. It's an interactive course. You're not just looking at me talking. It's a bunch of short videos so that you can feel like you're making progress through it. And every video is interactive. There are exercises that go with each part of the course. So over the course of, it's kind of designed to be done in 5 weeks, although you can take as long as you want. But every single day for 5 weeks, you have exercises that tell you exactly what to do. These are quizzes, listening and comparison exercises where you record yourself, exercises where you practice analyzing native speakers, and a bunch of other things. So it's a super thorough way to look at Spanish pronunciation and start to build some of the sounds of native Spanish speakers into your own Spanish so that you feel more at ease when you're speaking, basically.
Awesome. As I said, I checked it out, and it's really a very thorough and well-designed and well-produced course. Anyone interested in learning more about pronunciation, where they can find more? We will have links in the description, but can you share where to find more information?
Sure,
about
yeah.
that?
You can go to my website, breakthroughspanish.com. I've got a free pronunciation guide right on the homepage, and if you want to check out the course, it's one of the links right in the menu. The course is called Confident Spanish Pronunciation, and it's in bold in the menu, so you won't miss it.
Okay, fantastic, Connor. Is there anything else you would like to share with the audience, or that we have missed? Anything else to share?
I think that if you want to make progress in your Spanish, it's really important to have fun, like we talked about. Make sure that you incorporate something that you really enjoy into your routine. You can do some of the hard stuff like grammar. You can learn some of that, intentionally, but make sure that you're having a good time with it, because you can get by in a lot of the world speaking only English, and so you probably don't have to learn Spanish. So you have to find a reason why you really care about it, and on top of that, you have to make it fun for yourself so that you actually stick with it, because it's impossible. You can't learn Spanish really fast. It's going to take you a while to get to a level where you feel really, really good about your Spanish, and that's okay. Anything worthwhile in life takes time. It's really fun and interesting challenge, and making sure that fun is part of it is really important.
That's fantastic advice, not only with pronunciation, but with Spanish in general, with everything in life, right? If it's not fun, and as you very well said, most people don't have to learn Spanish, so just enjoy it, right? So fantastic,
Exactly.
fantastic advice. Conor, thank you so much for sharing all the expertise on pronunciation and on Spanish in general. Awesome. We will have the links in the description for the course and for Conor's website with the free pronunciation guides too. And yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thanks so much, Alejandro. Appreciate you having me. This was a great time.
Thank you. Ciao. Hasta luego.
Ciao.